So thanks everyone for listening to my introduction to the New Economy Network Australia. And if you want more information, do visit our website, neweconomy.org.au. But now I'm very delighted to introduce Shah Molloy, who is going to tell us a bit about the Environment Centre of the Northern Territory, because they're our co-hosts for our lovely webinar today. I'd never know what day it is. And just a quick reminder, if you are new to Zoom and you can't find where the speaker is, there's a button up in the right-hand corner of your Zoom screen called Speaker View. And if you click on that, you can choose Gallery or you can choose Speaker View, which normally shows you the bigger picture will be the people who are speaking. So, but without further ado, Shah, are you ready to share with us?
Absolutely. Hello and welcome everyone this afternoon. So I am Shah Molloy, the Director of the Environment Centre NT. So we are the peak community sector environmental organisation for the Northern Territory. And I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from Larrakia country and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that we're all on Aboriginal land wherever you may be in this Zoom call. So thank you so much, Michelle and Nena, for this opportunity to co-host this event. And the Environment Centre's NT's vision is a thriving nature and sustainable future for all Territorians. And one of our major goals is that the Northern Territory is on track to be a zero carbon economy by 2030. So a big lot of work that we've recently done is with Beyond Zero Emissions to create the 10 gigawatt vision. So that's really about transforming the Northern Territory economy from, predominantly gas and fossil fuel dominated to actually pivoting towards being a renewable economy. So we've also really looking at that transformation of the Northern Territory's economy through the lens of climate justice and having a just transition for all. So we've been doing some great work across the community sector, partnering with the Jesuit Social Service, Arid Lands Environment Centre and other NT and other community sector organisations to we've previously hosted 2 forums, and we're now actually working together as we come up to the Northern Territory election in August to create really what I know as the first climate justice scorecard. So that's really looking at, it's looking at that whole frame of how we actually transform our economy and our society through that climate justice lens. So, incredibly important, and that conversation is also very relevant in terms of the focus on having the transformation out of the COVID-19 virus crisis as well. So, really important conversations here that we're incredibly excited that there is, so much of a growing connection with both environmental and social organisations and what that means for transforming the Northern Territory economy. So that's probably all I have to say right now. We're going to have a presentation later from Monica Tan, our Repower NT campaigner, where you can get to hear more about how we're really making sure that that transition, dominated mainly by solar up here in the Northern Territory, benefits all Territorians. So yeah, thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Shah. And I just wanted to let folks know, a couple of people contacted me before asking if they could share the link with more people. We had a little hiccup at first with our account, but I believe it's okay and we can have more, much more people, many more people. Anyway, just letting you know that. So what I'd like to do now is I'm really excited to introduce Kamal, who's going to talk about the new Northern Territory Hub within Nena. And I'll hand over to you, Kamal, to share screen. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yes. So I'm just sharing my screen with you in a minute. Can you see?
Yes, hooray.
Yes. So I'll just put it on, Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, yes. So, hi everybody. I'm Kamal. I work at the Darwin Center for Bushfire Research. You see a bright rainbow logo at Darwin University. And we took the initiative, I think early this year, Michelle, isn't it? To have the NT Hub here in Darwin of Nena. And I have with me our coordinator, Rolf Gerritsen. So she's listening and watching this online as well. So we thought to do something that we are to showcase, I guess, that we are doing great things here in Darwin as well, as Shar has mentioned. Before I go any further, I just want to pay my respects to the Larrakia Nation, the land that we stand, breathe, and survive. And hopefully we sustain it for generations. And that way we pay respect to the past, present, and future elders of this nation. So we got a good kind of a wide range of speakers that you would see that there are great things happening in the NT. Not, I think some people sitting in the South Hall, they think that the Northern Territory is just lagging behind. We are not. Before I go further, I just want to introduce you about the sustainable concept that we've been thinking, ecological economics. It's the kind of background, the kind of discipline that I work in, and how it connects with Nena and how it connects with, you know, climate justice, what Shar been just talking about. So the word eco means house. It comes from that Latin word okos, and logi means study. And economics is nothing but management. So ecological economics is about managing the household in which we live in. So to afford that sustainable living and enhancing well-being of people is the main kind of theme embedded in ecological economics. There are three main disciplines, three main goals in this discipline. So the first is that we develop environmentally sustainable scale of doing things. And then we look at socially fair distribution. And the third is that we look at economically efficient distribution or allocation of resources. So if we focus on those 3-4 things, for all the things that we do on this planet, I guess we can all live a lot more sustainably, and we can have a real sense of development, not just the GDP kind of development that we've been all kind of hearing about, or the politicians been pushing about. We can have the kind of development that will enhance the well-being of people, not just the materials and the choices for materials that's been highlighted to us, mainly, you know, making us like a consumerism-based society. So moving away from utilitarianism to a much more well-being-based approach of well-being of development. So we got, as Michelle pointed out, we got really a good number of speakers, a wide range, telling us what has been happening in the NT and how NT been innovative. So our first speaker is Professor Rolf Gerritsen. Professor Rolf Gerritsen is the political economist at the Northern Institute, Darwin University. He will provide us a lot more background on the current economic profile and approaches and issues that we see in the NT, what's been happening, what's not been happening. But I can tell you from well-being perspective, much better than many other places in the world. And Professor Gerritsen has got a wide experience, and he has been working on Indigenous and regional economic development for more than 30-40 years. So he will share us his insights and how we can improve the NT economy in the future. And after that, we'll have Nena Boustead talking about carbon economy. We'll introduce the speaker as we move on. And then Monica Tang about repowering the NT. And at the end, Jane Monday about social well-being. So we'll move on to the first speaker, Professor Rolf Gerritsen, to hear about the NT economy. I stop my sharing, and I hope Rolf, can you join us now, please? I'll open up your.
Can we hear him? We had a bit of trouble
Yes.
before.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Hello, Rolf. Can you? Hello, Rolf. Can you speak out, please?
We did try, we were on for an hour before this call, checking everyone's speakers before everyone starts providing very helpful chat instructions. We have tested everyone.
Yes, we should be fine. I checked with him. He can see us. So.
Rolf, are you there? Can you hear us? Because we can't hear you. And what we can do, Kamal, is we can go straight to our next speaker, and perhaps you and Rolf can sort out his sound.
No, he's starting. So that's great. Yes.
Ah, very good.
Yeah, thanks, Rolf. Great.
I found someone younger than me, so
Oh,
fix my technical problem.
yes, so I'll share the screen soon, Rolf. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Kamal. Thank you, Rolf.
Yeah.
Want me to start talking now?
If you want me to share the screen, then I can share that file that you sent me. Just a minute.
Yeah, but you start, Rolf. Go ahead.
Yep.
Right, okay. I've got just a short time, and I want to sort of make 3 short points. The first point is about the economic history of the Northern Territory. And the economic history of the Northern Territory is that essentially it started in the 1870s with the invasion of the Europeans. Initially, the overland telegraph, so that well, intending squatters and intending miners came up along the overland telegraph into Aboriginal lands. Then in the 1880s, huge movements of cattle and white men swayed through the Barclay Tableland, right across the Northern Territory, the Victoria District, and into the Kimberleys. And so that was a period of great violence. Aboriginal people were conquered, and a paradigm was set up that I've called colonial paradigm, which gradually has been modified. I wouldn't say removed. So what we've got is a path dependence. Most of the thinking about economic development in the Northern Territory is about more of what we have had or the past. There's been some adaptation. I mean, if we take my earlier example, the cattle industry has adapted over time. It moved from its extensive cheap land because it was seized for nothing, and the slave workforce. In the 60s, it moved to mechanisation, contractisation, so it developed quite an efficient, relatively efficient economic model. And in recent times, it has engaged in breeding cattle specifically for the live trade to Southeast Asia, principally. So there has been some adaptation, and there has been, from the original primary industries type economy, there has been some additions, or if you like, complex economy with tourism, and very recently a small element of conservation services. I'm not talking here about the ones that governments deliver, which is basically white collar jobs in Darwin. Okay, so that we've got an economy that's in a particular shape. Did I disappear?
No, you're still there, Rolf, but your slides have disappeared.
Oh, okay. Well,
we can still hear you. Please do keep talking. Aha, it's all.
Okay. Right. So the current status of the economy is that it's dependent on episodic growth. In this century, for instance, we had the first LNG plant built, the waterfront project, which was funded by the government, and the second LNG plant, and that creates huge imbalances. That kind of episodic large-scale capital project creates huge imbalances in the white element of the population. So you get, an inflow of much FIFO labour, huge levels of economic activity, and we're currently in one of those recessions. And the problem with that model of development is that it really assumes, and this is one that conversation we need to have, is growth the only criteria for economic development? Because in the territory, historically, we say we equate economic growth or enterprise growth with development. I think they're more complex than that. And I think the white element of the population has to rethink the way it adjusts to and behaves in this jurisdiction, because a lot of the parameters of future developments count against them. For example, really over the last 40 years, there's been an increasing shift to what I call amenity. And so we can see population shifts following different definitions of amenity. And increasingly, amenity is non-economic. So it's, let's say, what we call lifestyle. Now, we have also in the current economy small harbingers of indigenous success. So, for instance, the Warrandy agriculture projects and various other agriculture projects at Maningrida, there's a successful traditional foods and etc. marketing operation. In Central Australia, we have bush tomato industry, which is in tune, if you like, with the environment. If we have rain, which is not quite often, Aboriginal people will go and collect the bush tomatoes and sell them. So we have, if you like, the glimmerings of what I would call an adaptive and sustainable economy. So we then get to, well, okay, what are the key current concerns and issues? There's a weakness, I think, in the notion that somehow the government has to drive the economy and has to create projects. And partly this is an issue of the weakness of the territory jurisdiction. Its fiscal base is eroding very rapidly and will become third within a decade. It's becoming an anomaly within the Australian Federation. So the strategy of the government somehow to drive the economy is going to collapse in spectacular fashion over the next 5 years. The notion of amenity and why people come to the territory, why people are white fellas. We have a real problem there in the sense that there is very low levels of white collar attachment to the territory. We turn over about 15% of the white fellas leaving each year. Currently, we're exporting more white fellas than we're importing. So that basis of the idea that we have to grow the population, i.e. the white fellow population, and come under challenge. And so we have to move to some kind of sustainability. And what I am interested in is we have different notions. I mentioned some Aboriginal economic development projects. I mean, there are small-scale tourism enterprises in Nena, etc. All of these are very small scale as yet, but they may not be. I mean, by small scale, I mean individual family operators. I don't think we should apply conventional economic thinking to them. Say, well, Aborigines would be better off if we scaled this up. That's sort of typical of economics, and it's not working.
Excuse me, Rolf, are you able to speak up just a bit? The sound has come and gone a few times, and at first I thought it was technical, but if you could just speak a little louder, that would be great. Thank you.
Do I speak at that? That's fine. Oh, okay. So I think the time is ripe, and that's why I was happy to join with Kamal in this exercise for a really serious debate about the future of the territory. What is it we are trying to achieve here? Are we trying to achieve economic growth so that eventually Darwin becomes the size of Sydney? It's not going to happen. So it's time for more realistic conversations about what is likely to happen, and it's time to shift the Aboriginal economic paradigm into the centre of the discussion and have a proper dialogue between, if you like, what I call the Western paradigm, which is at the basis of the white-collar politics in the Northern Territory. Because the Territory government is not going to be able in the future to sustain large-scale projects to try and get the economy going, because it's galloping towards bankruptcy. So the idea that facilities need to be provided here that are the same as anywhere else is going to be contested in the future. At the moment, I've been saying that, and everybody just laughs at it, but they're laughing less. And I point, excuse me, and I think, and I mean, this is why I think Nena's a good idea, is that we need to have a conversation about what it exactly is that we're trying to do. People say economic development, they don't necessarily mean economic diversification and changing modes of production. They mean economic growth. And so therefore it's A-order economics, what I'd call field of dreams economics. The idea is that the government should build something and then people will increase population. And we've done this about 20 times since self-government. And each time we had a short economic boom, measured in conventional terms. People, white fellas have come to the Territory. Some of them were stayed for more than 2 years. But we are really running our economy and our whole approach to development on completely different paradigms.
Thank you so much, Rolf. We're just about out of time. I don't know if your colleague can get you a drink of water, because I'd love to get you one. Are you Oh God, are you able to stay on the call? We were thinking of having each speaker first, because there's a lot of speakers, and then having some questions. If we stop for questions after each person, we might never get to the end. I'm sorry about that. Is that okay?
I'll go back to my office and watch it, and when you're ready to do the question, you might come back in.
That would be lovely. And Rolf, I've discovered there's a very daggy thing you can do. We're all going to clap for you. So thank you, Rolf. This is an air Zoom clap where you look like a moron, but it's the only way to say thank you for your talk. And we will look forward to staying in touch after the questions too. So thank you very much, Rolf.
My pleasure.
Kamal, you're on mute. Did you want to unmute yourself, Dal?
Yeah. No, thank you. A big thanks to Rolf, and he's been very busy, and still he afforded his time to be with us today. So big thanks. And the NT really needs this new vision for developing the economy if we really want to be sustainable and resilient, because we have experienced in this COVID-19 that we haven't been much resilient in this space, even surviving the food item that's available in the NT. So we really need to do something about it. So our next speaker, if I could introduce Michelle, and then we can keep going before any further time constraints, is Nena Boustead, who will actually take us on journey to one of these innovative economies and can demonstrate us that this is happening in the NT and it's unique to the NT. So Nena is the coordinator for the Indigenous Carbon Industry Network. She's a specialist in environmental policy and communications, and she will give us insights about the carbon economy that's really emerging economy in the North, sustainable, resilient, supporting Indigenous communities. Nena, up to you.
Thank you very much, Kamal. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, very well.
And thanks, Michelle and Shah, for organising today. And really appreciate Rolf's insights as well, opening today's session. I'm going to share some slides with everybody just to share a bit of information about where the carbon industry is at in the Northern Territory. Seems to have.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
You want me to come over?
Ah, she's got it.
Yeah,
Hooray.
it just takes a minute or so to upload. Yep.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Everyone can see the screen okay?
Yep.
Oh, great. So this is a picture of the 2020 North Australia Savannah Fire Forum, which was hosted by ICIN together with the working group, which includes a lot of members from the Darwin Centre for Bushfire Research. And along with our members and others. So just quickly, what is the Indigenous Carbon Industry Network? It's a fairly new network initiated in 2018 by Indigenous organisations that are engaged in supporting carbon projects across North Australia. It's supported by a steering committee of 8 Indigenous organisations engaged in the carbon industry. And on our network, we have around 34 Indigenous organisations across North Australia. We're funded through the joint governments across the north, and really pleased to see that Western Australia have just come on board too to provide a bit of support in the next financial year. So the Australian Northern Territory, Western Australia and Queensland governments provide us with funding support along with additional support from the Nature Conservancy. And that supports my position, which is a 4-day-a-week coordinator, and we have around, like I said, around 200 people on our network. We also host the Fire Forum, and this is some highlights from that event this year, which we managed to squeeze in just before the pandemic hit. So I have done a little bit of analysis and research last night to get the latest on where the Northern Territory carbon industry is sitting at the moment, just to give a bit of context before I go into the Indigenous Savannah carbon farming projects. So at the moment, the source of this information, by the way, is all online at the Clean Energy Regulator site. There's a project register there, which is updated regularly. So basically in the Northern Territory, there's one waste project, which is the Darwin landfill methane capture. There's 4 agricultural projects, which are herd management on beef cattle stations, and 3 energy efficiency projects, which are vary a lot from street lighting to some energy savings at the Gove Power Station, and a Woolworths initiative as well. Then there's 23 Savannah carbon farming projects, which includes 14 Indigenous owned carbon projects. There's, at the moment, since 2018, there's 2 methods available to proponents. The first is an emissions avoidance method, which accounts for the emissions that are avoided from the using early dry season burning to avoid hotter late dry season fires. And then there's another method which also accounts for the carbon that's stored in the logs and sticks on the ground which aren't burned, as well as the emissions avoided from hot dry season fires later in the year. And but at the moment, all of the Northern Territory Savannah carbon farming projects are currently registered under emissions avoidance. And the map just shows where those projects are located. As you can see, they're predominantly in the top end, and there's one project which is near Tennant Creek, which is also an Indigenous project. So the Indigenous carbon industry started off with the West Arnhem Land Fire Abatement Project in 2006, and that developed through partnerships with traditional landowners and Indigenous ranger groups, as well as scientists and ConocoPhillips. And that recognised that undertaking early dry season burning through traditional land management activities limited the extent of destructive late dry season wildfires, which provided more emissions. So then scientists worked together to develop methodologies in partnership with Indigenous land managers, and that resulted in the methods we have today. And as a result of that, projects and proponents can earn and sell Australian carbon credit units, and they can then either sell them to the Australian government via the Emissions Reduction Fund, or to voluntary buyers seeking to offset their carbon emissions. And Indigenous carbon credits attract a substantial premium on the voluntary market due to the multiple benefits they deliver to the environment and communities. So at the moment, there's around 14 Indigenous owned and operated Savannah Fire projects across North Australia, and around 93% of all Savannah carbon farming in the Northern Territory is by Indigenous owned projects. And that's very significant. They generate around 3.63 million ACCUs since 2012, and one ACCU is equivalent to 1 tonne of greenhouse gas emissions. Most of those projects are located in Arnhem Land, and they've been very successful in doing this, and are very experienced in bringing back the early dry season burning. So that the industry is valued at around $54 million since 2012. And that's an estimate because although we know what the prices are on the emissions reduction fund through auctions, we don't have exact figures on what the prices are on the voluntary market, although we are able to give a pretty good estimate. So these projects are enabling Indigenous fire management across vast landscapes, and this generates environmental, cultural and social benefits of global significance. And importantly, around 70% of the production of ACCUs actually occurs in the Northern Territory through the Indigenous Savannah carbon farming. And you can see here, this is a breakdown of the production of ACCUs through Savannah carbon farming projects. And you can see in the Northern Territory just how successful the Indigenous owned projects are. And also this is generated, these methods are now applied in Queensland and Western Australia as well. And this is providing a lot of opportunities for Indigenous groups across North Australia. And these are the number of projects. So you can see in Queensland there's a lot more projects, but actually the number of projects doesn't necessarily mean that there's more carbon credits produced. So this is a homegrown science that's come out of Northern Territory and has initiated in West Arnhem Land. There's lots of additional benefits which are not necessarily accounted for, but the Indigenous carbon credits do attract a substantial premium on the voluntary market as a result. So through enabling improved fire management outcomes across vast landscapes where access by road is limited, and it's unique in that it generates multiple environmental, cultural and social benefits. The industry provides meaningful training and employment opportunities on country in very remote areas where jobs are scarce, and enhances opportunities to access country, intergenerational exchange of traditional knowledge and practice, and also empowers land managers by providing an independent source of income, as well as improved biodiversity outcomes of global significance. So the economic value of these additional co-benefits are becoming more formally recognised through different frameworks, such as the Aboriginal Carbon Foundation's Core Benefits Verification Framework. There's also other frameworks such as biodiversity credits, gold standard and healthy country plans that are used to evaluate these outcomes. But it is a growing area. So we actually surveyed our member organisations in August last year to find out how they were reinvesting the revenue that they raised through their carbon projects. I should add too that there's a lot of diversity across the industry in both the scale of the projects and the capacity of different organisations to support to manage the projects themselves. So there is a lot of diversity across the north. But these are the key investment strategies. Obviously, firstly was to pay for the fire management and pay fees, and majority of revenue went towards employee costs in particular, which is a really great thing because it shows that it's employing a lot of people on country, which is delivering all these other great outcomes as well. Also, there's costs associated with planning. Before each fire season, the groups undertake pre-fire season planning, and then at the end of each fire season, they also evaluate their early dry season burning. Supporting traditional owners to access country, and supporting intergenerational exchange of traditional knowledge through events such as cultural fire camps and ranger exchanges. And then also infrastructure such as new ranger bases or outstations and road networks, community development such as meetings and consultations, training and professional development of staff, and building relationships as well as project development and research projects. So as you can see, there's a wide range of benefits, and interestingly, all of the participating organisations reported an increase of capacity as a result of their engagement in carbon industry through better equipped ranger groups, better governance outcomes, organisational growth, investment in community infrastructure, increased financial sustainability because it provides a really important source of independent income that's independent of government funding or any other or philanthropic funding, where they're able to just put it towards whatever traditional owners deem that they want to put it towards, which is really great. So it's empowering. And new partnerships as well also came out of people's engagement in carbon industry. So and that's another important outcome, is that the industry supports knowledge sharing through events, ranger exchanges, workshops and networks such as ICIN. And this is a picture of the Mimal Women Rangers at the Savannah Fire Forum in front of a sign of their picture. So they were really proud to get a selfie with their own selfie.
I hate to interrupt, Anna. You've come up to the 10 minutes, so I don't want you to stop, but maybe if you are close to wrapping up for us.
No worries. Okay.
Thank you.
Just wanted to recognise some of my colleagues here at the Darwin Centre for Bushfire Research have published an article in the Conversation, as well as their presentations at Fire Forum, which recognises that North Australian fire management is best practice, and that's partly been driven by the success of savanna carbon farming. You can see the shift there. I might come to this a bit later. That's a bit of a case study in how the coronavirus impacted on the industry. But basically we found that the building capacity for locally driven responses in a crisis such as the coronavirus pandemic really enabled that economic opportunity to continue, despite the fact that it happened differently. Because the industry is both highly adaptive and responsive, the fire management was able to go ahead, and I guess it's a really good example of why supporting locally based industries such as Indigenous carbon industries is so important. And there's lots of opportunities in terms of method development, different types of methods that could invest in to see further benefits through the carbon market, and lots of opportunities for growth through increased recognition of better prices, growing willingness to pay on the voluntary market, and also the methods and more importantly to climate change policies that support action on climate change. So there's lots of opportunities to grow the Indigenous carbon industry through clear and consistent government policy, removing barriers to the uptake of new carbon methods, and that would also result in increased accounting of the carbon savings from fire management, and importantly, recognition of Indigenous native title rights in interest in carbon is also critical. And to that end, we've published a guide, best practice guide to seeking free, prior and informed consent from Indigenous communities for carbon projects. So some of the learnings from the Indigenous carbon industry's experience is that Indigenous-led industries born of genuine partnerships are really vital, and there's an enormous value in harnessing the immense knowledge and experience and practice of Indigenous people in the Northern Territory, and recognising the value they have to contribute to the economy. I guess this touches on some of the points that Rolf made. It really does start with recognition, and then, you know, working to the unique strengths of the Northern Territory, we can generate win-win outcomes for remote Indigenous communities, the environment, the climate, and the economy. And there's also opportunities to link strategies to other policies, such as the Close the Gap on Indigenous Disadvantage and Sustainable Development Goals, and be willing to think outside the square of mainstream industries. It's something that I bump up to all the time, is that, and I think Rolf alluded to that, just the need for a paradigm shift and to acknowledge that there are other opportunities outside the key current major industries, and that collaboration is really key to the success of these emerging industries, and there's enormous value in partnerships and supporting those as well. So that's some of there's a fair bit of detail to get through, but if you want to get in touch, there's my details there. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Anna. That was fascinating. Back to you, Kamal.
Yep, thanks, Anna. Thank you very much. That was great. And now we got Monica Tang. Monica, are you online with us?
Yep.
Okay, great. Monica is the manager of Repower NT, and she's been a champion for promoting renewable energy, I think mobilizing politicians, and I'm sure the public is with you. Up to you, Monica, to take us to the journey of how we can repower the NT.
Thanks. Yeah, so I work for the Environment Centre NT. Hopefully Shah's going to bring up that presentation soon. And we identified last year that there was a need for a campaign that really articulated which direction the NT should head in terms of our economic growth or even economic recovery. It's pretty traditional for environmental groups to be vocal about what they don't want. For example, here in the NT, there's a very strong anti-fracking campaign. It's a little bit more unusual for us to articulate what we do want. And we saw that as a gap where, you know, if we are going to have a credible voice in terms of shutting down a certain industry or at least phasing it out, we needed to be able to really flesh out exactly what it means in terms of people's jobs, in terms of their communities. I think we learned a lot from that last federal election, that to go into a regional community and say, you know, no more coal or no more gas without having some kind of alternative is really unfair. And I think it really speaks to this word justice. When we talk about climate justice, it's important that we think about people. We think about the fact that they need to feed their kids. They need to keep you know, keep paying those bills. They need meaningful work, and to go out there with a message that, you know, that those people, you know, they need to bear the brunt of that transition, just isn't really fair. So we teamed up with a Australian think tank called Beyond Zero Emissions to do exactly that, flesh out exactly what it would look like if the NT decided to, you know, really definitively move into a renewable energy future. This 60-page report, you can download it for free on our website, is, you know, really kind of nuts out the industries and the methods in which we could move into renewables. You know, what does that actually look like? Well, it means 10 gigawatts of, you know, renewable energy. That's a phenomenal amount of power. That's, you know, much, 10 times or possibly more than that, the kind of energy that we're producing now. Using that to create a unique selling point for the Northern Territory. For those of you who don't know, renewables is now on par with coal and gas, and in many circumstances it's cheaper than coal and gas. We have a solar farm being built out not far from Darwin that is going to be selling power to the grid at less than half of what the grid is currently paying for via gas. So, you know, that's an incredible opportunity for us to be able to attract new industries and to build up our own local industries, our own local businesses, support local entrepreneurs with extremely cheap energy. And we think that that's, you know, that's something that we can, it's a good news story that we are really excited to be campaigning about. If we go to the next slide. So I'm currently in Alice Springs, even though I'm usually based in Darwin, and you know, I'm on a big road trip through the territory, making, you know, having lots of really amazing conversations with different communities, different stakeholders, political candidates. And I spent a week in Tennant Creek, which is sort of 5 hours north of Alice Springs, and met with Warramunga Elder Norman Frank and Wallumbah Elder Christine Morton. They are two, you know, Indigenous people who are in a very interesting space when it comes to renewable energy. In Tennant Creek, we have a proposal for an extremely large solar farm called Sun Cable. They want to build on Christine's land. You know, they're currently in discussions with Christine and the Wallumbah people about building a massive solar farm that will produce, you know, incredible amount of energy. They want to pipe that through high voltage direct cables, you know, extremely efficient cables over to Singapore. Of course, Australia has been what I call the arms dealer when it comes to carbon emissions. We've been powering Asia for decades now with our coal, with our gas. We've been exporting iron ore for all those big steel apartments, you know, steel that's used in apartments going up in Asia. I think that because we are, you know, we've been servicing that fossil fuel economy, you know, it's beholden on us to also look at how we might help the world transition into renewable energy. But of course, we come up to a very sort of, but you know, if we take it to the NT, I mean, that all sounds very good and well and very abstract, but we forget, I think we often forget in these national discussions about renewable energy, that those farms, they're going on land, they're going on people's land, they're going into communities, and those big projects make a huge impact on local communities. We're talking about tiny communities. I mean, the Tennant Creek does not have an industry. They're not, you know, there's not a huge, they don't make lots of things at the moment. There's not a lot of opportunity in that area for jobs. To plant a huge project like that potentially has massive ramifications for the local Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people who live in that area. So, you know, we are on the verge of more and more of these large-scale utility renewable energy projects popping up in Australia that they are comparable in size to a large oil and gas project. It's a very sort of delicate period where we need to see how is this industry going to operate. Are they going to emulate some of that power disparity of other resource industries? Are they going to do things better? Are they going to do things differently? A project like Sun Cable, which will be visionary and historic, will, I think, set the tone for what the renewable energy industry will look like. There are also other schools of thought and other proponents certainly here in the NT who sort of want to stay away from extremely large scale projects. That's the beauty of renewable energy, and that's the beauty of our incredible solar resources here in the NT. We don't necessarily have to have huge projects. We could have distributed projects. We could have small to medium size projects that are dotted throughout the NT, that are very integrated and grassroots, that come from the community. I mean, I read an article recently that said 25% of Australia's energy needs will come from household rooftops. Already, the utilities and governments of Australia are having to catch up with household rooftop solar. Right now, we are pushing up against barriers from the network because so many Australians are refusing to buy into any kind of ideological debate about solar, and they're choosing to install that technology on their roof, which is fantastic. They're choosing to be energy generators, not just energy consumers. But it is causing complications to a grid that was not designed for that kind of technology, and certainly not the levels that we are starting to see. So, for us and our campaign, energy equality, energy equity, access to reliable, cheap energy, no matter who you are, no matter what kind of Australian or Territorian you are, is really important. And being able to empower communities to achieve their dreams and to live a better life is just as important to us as driving down carbon emissions. If we could just quickly go to the next slide. I'm not going to go into this too much, but we have articulated 10 important points for the politicians running in the NT election, which is happening in a couple of months. These, we think, are 10 important policy ideas or mechanisms in which to continue to drive the uptake of renewable energy here in the NT. And Shah, if you could skip to, not the next one, but the one after that, just the one after that. Yeah, so if you are sort of excited by some of the things I've talked about, we'd love you to, actually I've just realised lots of you aren't in the NT, but those of you who are in the NT, we would love you to join the campaign. We've got these beautiful signs that you can put up in your front yard. We've got bumper stickers. All of you who, no matter if you're in the NT or not, if you're interested in learning more about our campaign, our website's there, ecnt.org. /freepower_NT, and consider becoming a Territory Guardian. We obviously run on the smell of an oily rag, and any kind of financial support, whether in the NT or not, really helps us continue to have what we think is a really exciting and unique campaign in the environmental space. And we hope it's a campaign that puts both people, communities, as well as the environment at the centre of our work. Feel free to drop me an email. I'll put it in the chat if you would like one of the signs, and I'll put it in there in a second. And get in touch if you want to know more. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. That was great. We are achieving something, I think, looking at this with carbon economy and repowering the NT. I think we will get somewhere. And that's what leads us to Jane Monday's talk. So Jane is a community engagement and social impact assessment practitioner. And Jane been working in the field for more than 20 years. But I think today Jane will talk about how this all links to social well-being, which we all need, especially at these times. Because ultimately what we've been talking about development is all about social and personal well-being. If we are not well enough, how can we kind of take the advantage of facilities that we'll have or the materials that we have? So that's one of the saying from a famous economist, Professor Amartya Sen. So from his perspective, development is what we can achieve. If we can develop the right opportunities for people to use those opportunities to enhance their well-being, then that's a right way of develop a country or to develop a region or whatever scale we want to think about. But if we don't have the right opportunities, and those opportunities mostly lie in the hands of policy decision makers or the politicians. If we don't have those opportunities, we fail to enhance our well-being the way we want it, the way we want to lead our lives. So in the current crisis, I guess we all need to think carefully, how can we have a just society? There is fair distribution of resources, and there is kind of efficient allocation of resources, and we don't become a burden on the environment at the same time, because that's the basis of our survival. So Jane, you are taking us to the top of the level. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, have you got my screen?
Yes.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, I have to click on that. All working?
Yes, Jane, you got it.
Amazing.
Well
Top
done.
of the technology queue.
10 out of 10.
So just by introduction, I'm speaking to you as a Charles Darwin University PhD student, and the topic I'm looking at is a model of social and cultural impact assessment. And we've talked about ecological, but I'm looking at socially, culturally, economically, and ecologically sustainable development of Northern Australia. And picking up on Kamal and Sen, the definition of well-being being the capability of people to lead lives they have reason to value. And so I was asked to talk about indicators, which is how we measure the dimensions of well-being. So I'm just going to show you a few approaches and then slowly work through to what I'm suggesting. So I think it's important to start by saying that well-being is multidimensional and interdisciplinary. One of the things I'm arguing in my PhD is we tend to focus very much on quantitative indicators or things we can count, whereas we also need to listen to people and gather data from people, which is a mix of social science and natural science. And just to give you a few examples of the difference, these might be self-evident, but it just bears a bit of reminding. If you're talking about population, for example, an objective quantitative indicator would be a count of how many people might live in a place, or how many people in Darwin come from Adelaide, for example. Or you might ask the question differently about where do you call home? And people will answer that differently based on an emotional response where they connect with their family, and it's probably going to be a different response. So if you apply that, I've given you some examples here, the difference between counting how many houses in a place versus people's satisfaction with that housing. What's the quality, suitability, affordability of the houses people live in? Rather than just counting jobs, it's about what's people's level of satisfaction with the jobs they have or they have access to, are they inclusive, and do they have stable jobs, not just casual, occasional part-time jobs. And as many people have argued, GDP is an insufficient count of well-being. So we also need to look at how economic benefits and costs are distributed across the population, but also what people, going to Rolf's point, is what sort of livelihoods do people actually value and want, so that it's much broader than just a count of GDP. So this is an urban example, if anyone's interested. This is the City of Sydney, has a community wellbeing indicator framework. So they have got 5 domains of what they describe as community wellbeing. Those domains being healthy, safe and inclusive communities, culturally rich and vibrant, democratic and engaged, dynamic and resilient local economies, and sustainable environments. And then the measures against that on the right, as you can see, are a mix of qualitative and quantitative. So life expectancy, for example, is a quantitative measure, whereas self-reported health is much more about qualitative, how people feel. I'm going to skip through this fairly fast, but if anyone would like my slides so you can absorb the detail at your leisure, I'm happy to give that to you later. So that's fine, Sydney's a big urban city, but then how might we look at that in a context that's relevant to the Northern Territory? So the next example I'm showing you comes from Canada, which I think is a much more relevant context for looking at sustainability as compared with the Territory. Canada, when they do impact assessment, refer to valued components. So this is just an interesting example. Ruby Creek was a mine in British Columbia, and on the left you see what the impact assessment study team came up with. This is the dimensions for their study. When that study was done, the First Nations people who were affected by that mine were not happy with the study, so they got funding to do their own, and I think it's quite stark how different they conceptualised the dimensions. This is what mattered to them. And there was a very detailed study done against that, but perceptions of well-being and culture were very different from the way they'd been conceptualised in a Western scientific framework, and what mattered to them. It was mainly qualitative, and I should say, you know, we're very obsessed with measuring everything, but a lot of these things actually can't be measured, they can only be described, and I think that's important to keep in mind as well. So then I looked at New Zealand. New Zealand have got a very strong focus on social wellbeing. They do studies every year, their general social survey. They've got a living standards framework that Treasury released in 2018. That's designed to assess the impact of government policies on the wellbeing of New Zealanders. But the really important thing is it recognises a diversity of beliefs, assumptions and values that shape New Zealanders' view of the world. It draws on the UN Human Development Index, which is based on SEN's work, and also the OECD How's Life, which has a quality of life focus. So that's just a list of the main domains, but against those there's a lot of indicators for each of them. But again, they're not just quantitative, there's a lot of very qualitative measures there, and they are now reporting against that for government programs. Importantly, it includes cultural identity, so therefore that's the link, I think, with Northern Australia. So they've got 12 current wellbeing indicators, but importantly, they've also got 4 indicators, or 4 dimensions against future wellbeing, which is more of a sustainability focus. It's futures oriented, it's based on those 4 capitals. And so that brings me really to the next phase of what I want to talk about is what is sustainability? It's something I've been looking at. So that's the traditional approach to sustainability. That's as it pretty much emerged in the 70s and 80s. It was a concept of 3 pillars. They were equally balanced: economic development, environmental protection, and social equity. I'm arguing that the 2 of those pillars have pretty much dropped off, and its impact assessment has increasingly become only about the environmental pillar. So another approach is integrated circles, and that's better. It shows that there's an interrelationship between the 3. But I thought, what if you put a values lens over that to come up with indicators that reflect what people really value and what matters in their lives? So values are often described as just environmental values. What values do we attach to various environmental components of our landscape? I'm saying there goes much deeper than that. If you look at most conflict or dissent in society, if you go under people's positions, they're usually driven by their values. We tend to hold values very strongly. They're a measure of what we believe in and very much what we'll fight to defend. So if you overlay that on the 3 intersecting circles, and I stress this is conceptual. To do this properly, I would want to do a very thorough values mapping exercise and ask people, what are your values? But I'm just trying to convey what that might mean in a Northern Australian context. So this is just an approach to defining what sustainability might mean in an environment where most land in the territory belongs to Aboriginal people. Aboriginal people clearly retain strong links to the land, and we need to incorporate that in any system that's measuring wellbeing indicators. And I've put stewardship and wellbeing in the centre of those. And then, so finally, how do we bring that to a framework? So this is based on some work we did last year when the Northern Territory Government set up a working group to look at a guidance note for the SREBA for fracking, and they were looking at a guidance note that covered social, cultural and economic. In the workshop, we discussed what were the indicators that would need to be measured by those studies. And then I did quite an extensive literature review to think of how could they be organised. So the traditional social impact assessment dimensions are based on Van Clay, who is still regarded as best practice social impact assessment. But I amended the model to try and reflect a Northern Territory context. On the right there, I've put the literature that this is based on. But the living environment, for example, in environmental impact assessment, there's often talk of amenity. And I think increasingly amenities being recognised as having strong wellbeing components, the aesthetic of landscapes, place-based attachments. Healthy country clearly is designed to reflect the Northern Territory context. Aboriginal people often say they worry about healthy countries, so that's designed to reflect that. Cultural identity takes from the New Zealand wellbeing dimensions. Strong voice is actually from a Canadian study in the 70s where they talked about political efficacy, but it's us having a strong voice, feeling that we can have a say and some control over what happens to our surroundings. With economics, as Rolf said, economics is not just about big projects and GDP. So economics in the territory context would need to reflect sustainable livelihoods. And the infrastructure and services, it's not just the bricks and mortar that needs to be taken account of. As I said earlier, it's also the quality, availability and affordable of those services, which is a much more subjective measure. So I've tried to skip through and hopefully stay within my 10 minutes, but that's my presentation.
You did very well. Thank you, Jane. We might actually go to some very quick questions. I'm aware that a lot of folks will have to jump off and go either back to work or back to life. Kamal, did you have any initial kickoff questions you wanted to ask? Any questions in the chat, because I think it's been a wonderfully full webinar. And in fact, before I turn to you, Kamal, I guess I wanted to mention two things. If everyone who gave a presentation today that would like to forward the slides to me, I'll also put them on the Nena website so people can access that and this recording. And I guess just a quick reminder, this is not the end of this story. This is the beginning of the Northern Territory generating conversations and discussions. And I'll actually be inviting all of you back into other kinds of sectoral discussions if and when people have time in the future. So Kamal, did you want to kick off a question or two? And we'll just see if anyone's still on. We might go for another 10 minutes and then shut down.
Sure, not a question, Michelle, but it's more about us having this platform to share these new initiatives and the things that we can do in the NT. I guess having us all together, this offers us a great platform that we can all talk to each other and link the economies like carbon, renewable energy, with the well-being of people. And there is huge potential for ecosystem services kind of economies which are emerging, and having Rolf there to tell us the history, what has succeeded in the past and how can we make it work in the future. I think it's really puts us all together, and I see a great value in this if we keep on working towards it, and we can probably make some shift in a right way.
Thanks, Kamal. There's a few dropping off, but while there are still more than 40 of us on this call, is there anyone who's got questions for any of our speakers? Everyone's still on and doing very well in terms of energy levels, I think. It's been a fascinating discussion. I've really enjoyed it. while we wait to see, I actually have a question. Well, actually, I have a question for everyone, but I won't be greedy. Jane, I was wondering if we could rope you into some further discussions within Nena about well-being indicators and such down the track, because we've got a strong focus on connecting to the international network called the the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and it's a very big international. It's new. It's actually a year younger than Nena. Otherwise, we may well have called ourselves a Wellbeing Economy Alliance, but we're connected. But my question is, I noticed that you challenge the 3 pillars. That's cool. And then you've got an integrated model of sustainability, and that's great. But within the environmental space that I work in, my main hat is with earth-centered law. We actually look at nested sustainability. So I'd love to, have you rejected that approach for your model, or have you not got to that stage yet? So with, the economy being inside the environment.
I prefer the integrated approach because I think it reflects Aboriginal worldviews. And I've seen a question just come up from Jude Allen. Yes, I have looked at the Sustainable Development Goals, and I think it's really important. The Australian government policy really refers to that. Their Sustainable Development Goals are designed to be transformative and look at projects not just for the negative impacts, but how they can transform societies. So yes, I have. But yes, no, I have seen the nested approach. I just prefer the integrated approach. And, with Australia's ecologically sustainable principles, I think we've become overly focused just on environment, and we need to look at well-being covers people and communities, and we need to remember that.
Wow.
And also Canada has actually adopted that approach. If you look at Canada has a sustainability policy and a new Impact Assessment Act, and they refer to 5 pillars, including health. So I just
that
think
is so interesting. I won't go on, we'll chat further, but actually the world I work in, both politics and economics, everyone says that the biggest focus, we always talk, and Ian Lowe talks about, we started with the 3 interconnected, but we ended up with Mickey Mouse because the biggest one's the economy. I don't live in a world where the biggest one is the environment. It's been completely pushed away from economic decision making. So I think you and I can have some very interesting discussions in the future. But we'd love to have you back, all of you back, on different issues. But the wellbeing indicator work is really important for Australia. So yes. There's a couple of comments from Nick, and this might be a way for you to connect. He's asked particularly about how can we draw, how can we promote SREBA, SREBA conversation in the lead up to the NT election. Maybe, Kamal, you could reflect on any thoughts you've had for the NT hub of Nena and how people come together in the future to discuss stuff.
Yes, I guess they can find us through Nena NT Hub and drop us an email, and we'll get in touch. And including Jane and others, we can probably do something in this space. And I think ECNT will be interested, Shah. Yeah, no, that'll be good. I guess the another question for you was, Jane, about that index of happiness that Bhutan uses for its well-being measures. And that's been happening much before New Zealand and Canada started it. And the beauty about that index is they have inbuilt the ecological parameters in the whole index, and that's ongoing. So to me, environmental forms the basis, and then you drive the economy and the society. You know how the donut being framed for sustainable development goals. So we got the environment at the base, then we got the small square sitting on the top, which is economy, and then the society. The benefits won't flow anywhere if we haven't got the solid foundation. And that's what we are doing. To me, we are sitting on a tree that we are chopping ourselves for our future generations and for us. So it's kind of, you know, how we look at the well-being of people, the way we want to promote it, and then influence the policies down so that we integrate those things which are key for our survival.
And donor economics is just a modern version of nested sustainability. So anyway, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes.
I've just put in the Nena email address for, it's the main one that comes through, and then we flick it out to different hubs. So if anyone's chasing further connections in the long run with the Nena NT Hub, and we hope you do. Please do send an email through, and Kamal and Louise will be in touch with you, and hopefully organising further discussions, whether in person or cross Zoom. Are there any other questions folks can see in the chat? I'm having a little look. I think we've got a few comments which are really great, but I'm looking to my other speakers and particularly to you, Kamal. It's nearly 2:05, 5:02 for me, coming up to the end of the 90 minutes. Well, we're past the 90 minutes. Are we happy to start wrapping up? Even though we didn't have as much time, we had almost no time for questions. It's a good kickoff to these fascinating issues. What do you think, Kamal?
I think it's been great. Thanks to you, Michelle, for providing this opportunity, having all of us there and connecting all of us, because otherwise we find it hard how to connect. And this NT Hub, Nena, actually encouraged us to do something. We've been thinking about doing this. So big thanks to Lois for pulling it all together, and big thanks to all our speakers who've been fantastic. And I guess in this space, we all need to connect more and more to do things better in the NT. And that'll bring us to bring social justice development the way we want it, and probably sustainable society in the future. And hopefully it'll enhance our well-being, not just for us, for our future generations too. So we need to really look ahead and look at the right, bright path that we got.
Thank you. That's lovely. And look, for those who haven't jumped off yet, I'm going to quickly show you the Nena website, because we've got some pretty cool things we haven't had a chance to chat about. The website's about to be updated. It's a little clunky to look at, but you'll see all of the sectoral hubs are listed. Some are very active, some less so. Do have a look yourselves. We've got news, we've got the journal, but what I wanted to show you was this, the National Civil Society Strategy for a New Economy. And this is something all hubs are invited to provide input on. We've got some templates. We've got a strategy directions group, which sort of sits across people from all the different coming together to actually articulate across Australia at the national scale, what do we want to see happen, at the regional, local, and sectoral scales, what do we want to see happen, so that over the coming months, we'll actually develop probably Australia's first big picture strategy and action plan for specific issues inside our economic system. I'm not saying it's the first time we've thought of these things, but it's one of the first times that people from across many, many different sectors are being invited to co-create this civil society strategy. So yeah, maybe that's something that Kamal and Louise can invite people to come and have a chat about in the lead up to the other thing I'll mention gosh, I'm having a mental blank. In November, we're having our annual Nena Conference. The next one will be in Newcastle. A lot of it will be streamed so people can watch. And it's also a lovely opportunity every year when we hold a conference, if we're all allowed to travel. It's a nice chance to get together with other like-minded people and run sessions and run workshops and share good ideas. So that's enough from me, but I do encourage you to visit our website. That would be terrific. So perhaps we'll wrap it up. There's still quite a lot of people on the call, which is lovely. But on behalf of all of our speakers, thank you so much. It's been really fun. And it's been lovely for folks like myself, I would imagine others too, down south or more southern than you, to hear about the very incredible and culturally and ecologically unique innovations, challenges and struggles that you're facing. And welcome to the Nena family. And anyone who wants to find us, please just jump on that website. Got a lovely note from a couple of people there saying, how do I connect? Please just jump on the website and have a look, but do email us, and I'm just putting it in again, nena@neweconomy.org.au. Within a few days, or even sometimes worst case scenario, up to a week, all emails get answered. We'll connect you with each other, with other people, join the webinars that we run, stay connected through the New Economy Journal, and definitely get on our mailing list. In fact, I'm trying to do a newsletter tomorrow. So jump on the mailing list today and you'll get a bit of an update tomorrow. It was meant to be last week. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Kamal.
Thank you. Bye. It's been wonderful.
Loved it. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. See you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks to all our speakers. You've been marvelous.
Yeah, absolutely. Very impressive.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
turning off
you.
the big button now. Bye.
Bye.